Car crash cases, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts. The attorneys with Josh Wright from the law firm of Hollis Wright and host David Lamb.
Hello and welcome into the attorneys. Thank you so much for joining us on this Sunday evening. For the next half hour, we've got a panel of experts ready to take your questions, your calls, and your emails and answer them. The easiest way to do that, you'll find the information at the bottom of the screen, way that you can get in touch with us. You get us the questions, we'll do our best to pass them along, and hopefully tonight deal with the questions that interest you. Leading our conversation from the firm Hollis Wright, Josh Wright, good to see you.
Good to see you too. Hope you're doing great.
Doing well, thank you.
Good week?
It was a good week.
Good. So we're going to do a show on elder abuse tonight.
Right.
This is not a topic that we cover all that much.
Right.
We've covered it several times. We're very lucky tonight to have Greg Foster back on the show. Used to be with our law firm, still a great friend of our firm, has gone out on his own, doing a great job in handling a lot of these cases, evaluating a lot of nursing home cases and hospital elder abuse cases, and so he's going to be a great component of the show. First of all, thanks for coming back, and I'm glad to see you back in this chair. This is
well, hey, I'm glad to be back, and thanks for the invite. I appreciate it.
So, David, as I was getting ready for the show and just kind of talking with Greg and getting prepared, the 65 and up group of individuals in society is going to compose in the coming years about 20 to 25% of the total society.
Wow.
So this issue is going to affect a lot. Right now, 41 out of every 1,000 people that are elders go through some type of abuse or mismanagement or issue that has to kind of be evaluated in this category of elder abuse. That's a really high statistic. Yeah. So the hope of the show, I think when Greg and I talked about the show, was to ensure and maintain that we're providing good advice to the community of things to look for and ways to protect elder adults in our society. And maybe the best way to kind of start this out is how did you get involved in this area of the law to start with? Because this is something you kind of had a passion for a while.
Well, absolutely. I think number one is working with Hollis Wright. Got to work with some fine lawyers over there and got introduced to this area of the law. And, you know, because the Hollis Wright, as well as I, have a compassion for elders, and in particular, I had a great relationship with my grandmother, and my grandfather, and you know, growing up. And so you definitely, when you live with older people and visit with older people, you understand their needs. And so it's been fascinating from a legal perspective to get involved in people's lives with their family members and see how we can help. And sometimes we try to get involved on the front end. I think this show is going to talk a little bit about how you can prepare for things before they occur, but then also kind of what happens if something bad is to happen, or how to find that, or how to look for it, and then what to do at that point.
And I think there's some common sense things we're going to talk about today, but why do you think it is that the statistics are so high that those that are in the elderly category are so susceptible to these types of potential mismanagement and issues and abuse?
What happens a lot of times is there's two critical issues. One, we're living longer, but what's happening is you're seeing a lack of capacity in adults. So maybe 20, 30 years ago or even longer, people would die at an early age, but now people are living longer, so what you're seeing are more mental type injuries. So you're seeing a lot more Alzheimer's, those type of issues where people don't really realize what's going on. So they really can't, they're not in a position to defend themselves. And so that's why sometimes, and then also that hurts with having certain faculties physically. So you may have a mental issue that opens you to abuse, but then also physically you're not able to do what you used to do. And then I guess the second component to that is maybe if family's not around to kind of protect them, then there's an issue.
Help us understand what falls under the heading of elder abuse. What are we talking about here?
David, great question. It really it's all kinds of things. So, you know, it's not just a physical injury. It could be an emotional injury. It can be a financial injury. It can, and this can be physical, is a sexual injury, but it also can be things like isolating an adult or, you know, an elder adult, not giving them proper interaction or treatment. So just anything that's improper. And I guess the best way to think about this is, you know, I call it flipping the script. I mean, what happens is you become older, your parents become older, and then there gets to a point where the roles shift.
Right.
And so you're really the adult, and your parents become more like the child. And so in that relationship, because you're going to have to do things like you would do for a child. And so that's the tough part, because you're so used to that person being involved in your life and taking care of you, and then you're going to be taking care of them.
Yeah.
And where are you seeing the types of elder abuse we're talking about today? Where do you see these most? I mean, are they in hospitals or nursing homes? Is it everywhere?
It's pretty much everywhere, but sometimes where it's more prevalent is in a nursing home facility where somebody maybe they don't have folks visiting them, or sometimes what you'll have is somebody will have Alzheimer's or dementia. They'll be in one of these nursing homes, and so they can't really articulate, hey, I need something to drink, or I need some help here, or somebody's come in and done something to me. And so it really somewhere where it's a long-term setting where maybe somebody's kind of getting into a system and maybe they don't have certain attention that's coming to them either from a family member or somebody at the facilities doing something to try to help them.
Yeah, and that was one of the questions I was going to ask you is, what do you think, you hear a lot about nursing home abuse, and certainly this is not a show to indict the nursing home industry because there's some incredible nursing homes in this area. Are there some ways, if your elder adult is going to a nursing home or an assisted living facility, that you can kind of protect yourself and protect that elder, and maybe some tricks of the trade, if you will?
Absolutely. I think the number one thing is the plan, and try to get ahead of it. A lot of times what happens is something bad will happen to your parent, and then the next thing you know, I have to get them in a nursing home. I can't take care of them. My brother, my sister, we can't all take care of dad or mom, so we've got to get them to the nursing home right now. Really, that's the wrong time to be trying to select a nursing home, because really what you want to do is on the front end, you want to try to select the right place and kind of have a plan into place so that you can get them there. It's kind of like what you're saying, Josh. You want to go visit that home. You want to get a feel for it. You want to see if you can get to know the people that are running it. And that way you develop a relationship with them so that when you're coming in, the family's coming in, they know you, they respect you, they want to do the best they can for your loved one, and you feel comfortable about that home as well.
Dave, I know we're about to go to a break. One of the things I want to talk about when we get back, and Greg will be great on this issue, some of the things to look for in the elder adult, because it's not necessarily like you and I where we can articulate somebody is doing something wrong to me or they're neglecting me. Sometimes, given the elder adult circumstance, given disease and injury and other issues, they're incapable of articulating what's happening to them the same way that you and I could. So I want to talk about that when we come back, because those are things that Greg evaluates on a daily basis, given the types of suits he files.
Yeah, we'll pick up right there whenever we come back. As we step aside for our first break, a reminder, we'd love to have you join the conversation. Call, text, email. Would love to have you join us and join in our conversation tonight on elder abuse. Stay tuned. More of The Attorneys coming right up.
I'm Carter Clay with the law firm of Hollis Wright. Thanks for watching The Attorneys on WVTM 13. Now, we hope you, a friend, or a loved one never need legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of this show is simple: to provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free, so if you have questions specific to this show or related to other specific legal matters, call, email, or text us to talk with one of our lawyers. You can also follow us on Facebook or Twitter to learn about important legal news that could affect you or your family member. Or simply contact us by going to WVTM13.com and click on the Attorneys link. Now, we know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us and for watching The Attorneys right here on WVTM 13.
Really important conversation we're having tonight. Elder abuse affecting so many people. Would love to have you join this conversation. If you have a question, call, text, email. Also a reminder, an attorney is standing by right now to speak with you, so take advantage of those opportunities.
So, Greg, when we went to break, I raised an issue that I want to talk about in this segment, and that is signs to look for. It's not always the case that an elder can articulate what's happening to them, but a lot of times I have seen personally, and I have seen in the legal world, there are circumstances where an elder adult is not capable of articulating exactly what's happening to them because of disease or other issues, or maybe even fear. What are some things to look for that you see in your practice that help people make sure that their elders are being treated correctly?
Josh, great question. And going back to what we talked about earlier, remember we're flipping the script, so we're going back to a child. Remember a child. Child's not always going to tell you what's going on. I mean, you've got to pull it out of them. So that's number one. If it's something that is an emotional or mental type of trauma, then it's something that you're going to have to pull out of your loved one. Another thing is that it could be hidden. So for example, say you're in a nursing facility and you go in and your mom or dad are laying in a bed and they've got the sheet up and because they're cold or whatever. If you don't pull the sheet back and you don't visually inspect your mom or dad, you're not going to see certain things. You're not going to see maybe a bed sore. You're not going to see maybe a large bruise that wasn't there last week because they had been dropped or something along those lines. So you have to basically pull the sheets back and see what's going on with your loved one's body, because if you don't check it, they may not say anything. They may be medicated at that point. You know, maybe they've gotten some pain medication and they're not going to say, well, hey, my hip's killing me because of the medication. So that's why it's important for you to do that.
And having Greg, having the benefit of being able to have worked with Greg in the past at our law firm, one of the things I remember him always telling me is, be vocal with your elder adult too. I mean, ask them questions when you go visit them. Number one, go visit regularly. But number two, ask them questions. Are you being treated correctly here? Are they moving you correctly? Are they feeding you the way you need to be fed? Those types of things. And a lot of times, you'll find that if you pull it out of them, they will articulate kind of the response that you're looking for one way or the other, whether it's a good result or a bad result. And then, as Greg used to always tell me, communication is key. If something is not going right, for example, at assisted living facility or at a nursing home, a lot of times the first result is not to go get a lawyer and go file a lawsuit against somebody. The first result is, let's go talk with the management here and figure out what we can do to make sure that this person's getting better attention, having a little more evaluation on them, whatever it may be. But a lot of times communication is really the key at those.
If you find something's just not right, and maybe it is, you see bruises or you see their checking account, some kind of abuse is taking place, are there both criminal and civil remedies?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's like what Josh is saying is first investigate, kind of see what you've got, what's going on. But like Josh is saying, you may want to communicate this to the home at first. But if it's something very severe that you feel that, for example, say you find some signs of sexual abuse, that is, that's a non-starter. I mean, that's something like we got to get my mother or my dad out of here. I mean, it's just there's not really much communication that you can have with the facility because obviously something has gone terribly wrong. But depending on the level of the injury, you may want to start with the facility, talk with them, and then another thing, David, if it's it could be something that you want to pursue criminally, it could be something that you want to pursue civilly. But the thing is maybe start with the facility, but I go back to what I said about a plan. Part of that plan is you may want to have an attorney just talk with them when you're doing your elder care planning, kind of talk with them, and then you can have them on call. So if something like this arises, you can call them and say, hey, this is what's going on. Is this something we ought to report to the authorities, or should we do this, or how should we handle it?
I remember in previous shows we've done, there's a way to compare nursing homes. Is it Nursing Home Compare? There's a website you can search on Google, Nursing Home Compare. And can't you compare nursing homes and kind of assess where that nursing home stacks up compared to others?
Absolutely, and that's a great point, Josh, because that is something that you absolutely need to do. And they break it down basically in 3 different criteria, which is the quality of the home, its staffing, and some other issues as far as how this home ranks as far as complaints and other things with other homes. And so that's a great place to start. You start there, do that research, and then you probably want to go visit the home.
Is there, are they categorized differently, abuse versus neglect? Because there's a case recently on the news, someone somewhere was just ignored, not fed, not taken care of, so it really was more a case of neglect. Is it different, categorized differently?
Well, in a way it is, in a way it's not. Neglect is really a subcategory of abuse. So it's a type of abuse. It's where somebody has basically neglected someone.
Right.
And so a lot of times we will talk about it as nursing home neglect or, elder neglect. And so it may be something where they did not go in and give them water, appropriately. They may not be appropriately hydrated. It may be something where they were neglected in the sense that they weren't turned, and so they developed these very large bed sores, things like that.
It's not always, these things don't manifest themselves physically all the time. Sometimes it's financial, right? I mean, there can be financial neglect or financial mismanagement of somebody's affairs. Is that fair?
Absolutely, and I think it's a two-pronged thing that you need to look at. One is the financial with the nursing home. Have they overbilled or have they billed for services that your loved one didn't receive? So you've got to watch for that because that can be an issue. And then the other side, what you're alluding to, Josh, is that the financial with the accounts of that individual. And so this goes back to the planning. If you've got somebody that before they become incapacitated, and I'm talking Alzheimer's and dementia are forms of incapacitation. So before they become incapacitated, you may want to get a power of attorney, and you may want to get a durable power of attorney and designate someone that's going to handle these things financially.
When we come back, David, because I know we're getting ready to go to break, I want to talk about some cases that Greg's seeing and that we see in the marketplace, the legal marketplace. We'll kind of go through some of those and unpack those just a little bit.
Good deal. We'll step aside our final break of the evening. Great conversation. I'm sure it's triggered some questions for you. Time enough just to get those questions into us. Call, text, email. Also find the firm on Facebook if you'll search the term Hollis Wright, and on Twitter they're at Hollis_Wright. Stay tuned. More of the attorneys coming right up.
I'm Carter Clay with the law firm of Hollis Wright. When someone whose unreasonable conduct causes an injury to someone else, the law says that person is negligent. So it seems the injured person should receive some type of damages, right? Not always so in Alabama. In tonight's Legal 411, we answer the question, what is contributory negligence and comparative fault? Alabama is one of only 4 states in the nation to withhold damages based on contributory negligence. Meaning, if you are at fault, even just a little, you cannot be allowed any damages in a case. For example, in a case where a defendant may be 99% at fault for hurting you, if you are found to be 1% at fault, Alabama law says you get nothing. 4 states, Virginia, North Carolina, Maryland, and Alabama, plus the District of Columbia, are the only places in the country where a defendant can completely avoid paying if the injured person is even 1% at fault. This is very different from comparative fault, the measure used in 46 states. There are 2 versions of this system, but both essentially allow money damages based on the percentages. For example, if the injured person was 20% at fault for causing an accident, then the recovery for medical bills and wages is reduced by 20%. Numerous studies across the country show that people who live in comparative fault states believe this system of justice is more fair. Please remember, your call, email, or text to the attorneys is free. All of us at Hollis Wright want to help answer your questions on real issues you face. Remember, a competent lawyer will always respond to every question you send in. That's our pledge and promise to you.
sobering firm facts there. Welcome back into the attorneys discussing elder abuse tonight, and would love to have you join the conversation. Call, text, email, those numbers you see at the bottom of your screen. Josh?
When we went to break, I mentioned when we came back in this segment, I want to talk a little bit about some example things that you're seeing in the abuse category. Can you talk just a little bit about that from your practice's perspective?
Absolutely, Josh. I mean, a lot of times what you're going to see is, or what you see most often, I guess, are falls. You know, you're going to see people who have broken hips, those type of injuries. You're also going to see bed sores. Because what will happen in some of the facilities, there may be a staffing issue, so people aren't coming in and turning somebody appropriately. And what I mean by a bed sore, I mean it's something you don't want to see. I mean, it's really what it is that the skin tissue on the body breaks down, and if it's very traumatic, then it's going to be something where it's going to get to a point where you see someone's bones. Okay, so it has an odor, and it's just something horrible that you never want, and it's very painful. And so you never want anybody to have that, but it sometimes will occur when people haven't been turned appropriately, because if they just sit in the bed all day and they're sitting on their backside, and that's where you're going to find it's like right on the very bottom of your back, before it comes into the buttocks, is where you're going to see these often, because that's a pressure point. So, and that's just something that, again, that's where you have to pull back the sheets and look at your loved one to see if that's developing. Sometimes you may even smell it, and that's a terrible thing. But that's another thing that we didn't really talk about is odors. I mean, when you go into a room with a loved one, is have all your senses. You want to have sight. You want to have, do you hear anything unusual? Do you smell anything unusual? And then just kind of break it down. I mean, again, it goes back, like if you have a child, you remember when they had a poopy diaper, you smell it, okay? And it's time to change that diaper. Well, sometimes, maybe your loved one's not, if they have an incontinence issue, are they being changed appropriately? Because if they're not changed appropriately, that wetness can help bring about a bed sore. And all that, bed sores also related to nutrition. Are they getting the proper food, proper hydration? I see in a lot of cases where people aren't properly hydrated. So are they getting enough fluids each day? And that's something that's not always going to show, but look at somebody. Do they have chapped lips? You're going to look for certain signs and symptoms for dehydration. But those are certain things that you look for, and then also overly medicated.
If you don't feel like you're getting an appropriate response from the management or whoever's responsible for the care once there's an issue, are there ways to document some of this stuff just to make sure that there is good documentation in case something goes wrong?
Excellent point, Josh, because this is the thing, is say something bad happens and you come down and 6 months later you say, well, listen, I want to file a civil complaint about this issue. Well, if you didn't document any of this, then you're going to be really reliant upon your testimony, the testimony of the people at the facility, and then the medical records, and that's really all you're going to have. But that's why documentation is important, because what is very powerful, say we have a terrible bed sore, and you took a photograph of it. The jury or members of that panel that's going to be looking at this case, they're going to understand very quickly. Pictures are very powerful. Think about it. You go to the movies. They don't just talk. I mean, there are pictures that you look at when you go to the movies, and that's what moves you, is the talking and the pictures. When you go to trial, it's the talking and the pictures.
The firm fact whenever we came back was about 90% is family or friends. I have a friend recently had an elderly parent, and what was really sticky was the family getting together, 3 children, and really doing what's best for the mom, which some family members were clearly not interested in. So in sticky situations like that, is that another way why legal counsel, kind of a third party to sit everybody down and and kind of make sure that we are doing what's in the best interest of the elder here?
Right, because in a way, you as family members, you don't necessarily have a legal fiduciary obligation, but in a way you're a fiduciary. I mean, you're needing, you should be. You should be in the sense of taking care of your loved one and their assets and doing it appropriately. And sometimes you may not know exactly how to do that, or you have a family member that's what we call rogue. They've got their own agenda that may not be in the best interest of your mom or dad.
That's what's happened here.
And so to kind of get that, yes, a way to kind of facilitate maybe getting us to where we need to be morally and ethically, then let's get somebody that's an independent party, so to speak, that's going to keep us on the right track. And that, exactly, an attorney would be a good person. And David, getting more to your point, I mean, and going back to what we talked about earlier, planning, there are all these issues. You've got to be concerned about how are we going to pay for this. So say mom and dad needs home health care. How do we pay for that? Have we applied for Medicare and Medicaid? Do we have the appropriate insurance? You know, you need to be thinking about those issues because that's where families get into a tight, and that's where the stress develops, is the financial burden. But that's something that you may be able to alleviate if you plan ahead of time.
Greg, talk a little bit about planning. I know that there are circumstances where you can plan and, for example, have powers of attorney that are limited to certain things, like, you know, you want to make sure your mom's assets are protected, and you've now got a duty, if you were a power of attorney, to totally protect those assets and not use them for your own benefit, but only use them for her benefit, those types of things. Aren't there some planning components that go into this too before we get to the stage of actually being in the assisted living facility?
Absolutely, and I think that's an important point, is about that you can have a power of attorney. Now, power of attorney, there's not one out there. I mean, there are general power of attorneys. You'll go on the internet and you'll find some general ones that say these are the general functions or whatever. But like Josh is saying, you can limit it. If you have 3 siblings, you can say Johnny's going to do the financial side, Sarah's going to do the medical side, and Susie's going to do the asset side as far as property or whatever. And you could give them each a power of attorney to handle those 3 issues. I mean, there's so you know, and that's perfectly fine. But within the power of attorney realm, keep in mind that you may want to have a durable power of attorney, because if they become incapacitated, the power of attorney evaporates unless it's durable.
Right. We just have time remaining just for final thought from both of you, and Greg, we'll start with you.
Well, I think it's like what we've talked about today, is just definitely plan, and then if things go, if they're unexpected and you see unexpected injuries, then you may want to consult an attorney, and definitely document these things. Take photographs, maybe even take a video, or take an audio, because those things can be helpful down the road.
Yeah, and what I'd say, David, is that, you know, this is not an indictment on the nursing homes out there, and the hospitals and assisted living, and even home health. There are some incredible workers out there that do a great job with the elderly. The key is find who those people are, work through the system to make sure there's a good line of communication and you've built a relationship and that you've got the right care for your elder adult. And don't be afraid to do some planning. I mean, there's some planning that needs to go into the power of attorney issues we've talked about. There's some planning that needs to go into kind of who's going to be monitoring mom, who's going to be monitoring grandpa or dad, to make sure that they are properly monitored and protected. And then use all your senses. I think the greatest point that I heard from Greg today was, you know, when you're dealing with an elder adult, use all your senses, not just what you see, but, you know, use all the senses necessary to be able to ensure and maintain that that person is in a good environment. They're being protected, not only protected, but they're being managed correctly, so that they can die with the dignity and the grace that they deserve and they've earned.
Yeah, important conversation. Yeah. Always glad when we have this conversation. So helpful. Appreciate both of you being with us, and thank you.
Welcome back, my friend.
Absolutely.
Welcome back, my friend. Glad to have you back.
Always glad to have you here, Greg, for sure. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next time right here on The Attorneys.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.